Hello and welcome. I am so glad that you're here with us either live or watching the replay because we have a wonderful guest. You might have seen Stephen Hinkle before on my show where he's talked about the hidden curriculum. And today he's going to be sharing some news stories with us about growing up with autism. And Stephen and I was trying to remember, Stephen, when we met, but I'm sure it was at the Peak Conference, right? The Inclusion Conference. And then Stephen and I also did some work in Tulsa, Oklahoma for high schools there as part of a project that Peak Parent Center had. And so I've always enjoyed listening to Stephen and learning more. He is an international speaker. He's even spoken in Australia. He will tell us about his life's journeys and where he's gotten different college degrees and the exciting degree that he's working on now. But I want to say welcome to you, Stephen. Thanks for being here with us.
Welcome, everybody. We've had some issues with the PowerPoint, so I'm going to keep it on there. But I want to welcome everybody. My name is Stephen Hinkle. I'm a disability rights advocate. I'm also an international speaker on disability. I've also been, I've traveled all over, although it's slowed down a lot since the coronavirus, but I've traveled to 24 U.S. states and Australia to present about disabilities. And I want to welcome you all. And I'm going to be sharing my story from when I was a little boy to today in this webcast here. So, the story is called Growing Up with Autism. And this is me when I got my master's degree from Northern Arizona. But when I was a little boy, I was in segregation and then later inclusion. I've traveled all over the place. Probably forgot to update that 19, probably more like 22 years now. It's just been a while. I've been very busy these last couple of months, so that's why. But when I was born, I just thought I was like a little boy. This is actually a picture of me when I was 1 year old. In Texas. I was born in Texas. And originally I just thought, I was just like any of the other little boys, playing around, doing what babies do. But I was typically developing until I was about a year or two old. And then my mom noticed I wasn't developing the same way. And then autism began to set in, and my social abilities went away, and some of the other things happened that really concerned my mom and my dad. I didn't know what they were exactly, but again, I was a little boy, and no offense to anybody, but they don't tell all the things, the truth here. And I didn't know I was different. When I was younger, I had no friends. I was in all these medical studies from where they were always taking blood and having me do all these psychological tests and all these things. There was ones for anything from things with the brain to vaccines to all the stuff that was going on in the early 80s at the time. And I didn't know why I was in them. It was not fun, of course, but that's what they are in terms of, but yes, it was research to try to figure out what was wrong. I remember I used to bang my head against the floor but I could program a computer. In fact, that picture you see is an old TI-99 4A, which was one of my first the first computer I actually had as a child. It's an internet picture, but it was the same model. But yes, it was that kind of computer when I was younger, and I could program that at age 4. I used to bounce my ball a lot. I wanted to, when we went out to parties and stuff like that, I did not want to be in the back room where, forth of all the little ones, I wanted to be with my parents for some reason. I didn't know why, but part of it may have been I didn't understand the unpredictability of little kids.
Stephen, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's a beeping sound.
What?
There's a beeping sound.
I think they're doing some construction work in my neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you.
And I wanted to be with my parent. And then I had many social challenges as well. I did not learn to dance until I was in the 12th grade. And I was clueless about many social things. And it was very rare when I got invited to people's birthday parties or other things like that as a child. And I did not even think I was supposed to invite other kids to my house. I was taught, don't talk to strangers. And I thought they took a very literal definition of stranger, meaning anyone outside my family, and that kind of a thing. So it was very isolating as a child and very lonely. And I was in all these studies, and yes, it was stressful. It was lots of testing. Yep, and all the stuff. So it was not easy. And I was on all these rotation diets. It was all these things I couldn't have, and made me a social outcast at some parties. And you know the feeling, right, Charmaine?
Oh, I know. Yeah, that's hard for lots of kids, right?
So I was diagnosed with autism, and I'm sorry to use the puzzle. I know that some people are not like that, but I just haven't had time to change the graphics. I will do that later. But I was diagnosed with autism, or Asperger's syndrome, as they called it back then. It's now called autism spectrum disorder. Autistic-like child. I didn't know what that term meant till I was about 14 when I asked someone about that. But I was a very bright child. It was all these things. And then they told my mom she was a refrigerator mother. She said she was neurotic. I said I had no future. They told my dad I should be locked in an institution. Boy, were they wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And I did many things that they said I'd never do. And it really, to me, the key lesson from this is we should never be putting limits on a person's future when they're so young. We should instead let the person decide what they're capable of and let them prove it to others themselves, not forced to prove, but let them show what they've got.
So, Stephen, I hate to interrupt you again, but for some reason, do you hear that beeping sound that I hear? And like people that are watching live say that when we don't talk, they don't hear the beeping sound, but when we talk, they hear it. Do you hear it, Stephen? Do you hear me, Stephen?
Yes, I hear it. I don't hear a beeping sound.
So I don't know what that is. I guess we'll just have to, we'll be okay. Do you want to bring your PowerPoint back? And I'll bring it back on screen. I'm sorry. Because now I see, there you go. Cool. Okay, go ahead.
Let me just make sure I don't think I have any other audio going in the background. I'll make sure of that for a minute. I don't think so.
Yeah, it seems to be when you talk, we hear that. I don't get it.
I'll push the camera mic back a little bit. Maybe that'll help.
Okay. We can go back to your PowerPoint.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Does it sound better?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay, I guess it was a little too close to the thing, but anyway, I started out at Tidewater Montessori, and I learned a lot of basic things of how to read and how to talk and how to do some basic counting and stuff. And it was a little new to me and stuff like that. I learned some basic skills there. And then I started out, was there for first or kindergarten as well, and really enjoyed it and stuff like that. And I learned many different skills and stuff, and it was the beginning of my education. That's a picture of me back when I was a little boy. And then in first grade, I fell off a chair and had a concussion. So I had to be homebound for a year, where the teacher, Dottie Malpass, came to my house and we learned our ABCs and stuff. And my mom had me on a special diet. In fact, there was some time where I was eating mostly bear meat and malanga. I hate to admit that, but yes, that was part of the special diet that my mom had me on because she wanted me on food families I did not ever have before. So it was boring, but yes, my mom was into all these things. And then in second grade, I started at public school in a segregated class, and that's when it was all these like CD and LD and all those labels were full swing at the time in special ed. And believe me, it was not a good experience. These classes were not challenging. It was no good role models. There was no good behavior role models in these special ed classes. I didn't make any friends. It was like those kinds of things, or didn't know I was supposed to be doing that. And I had trouble with executive functioning as a child. One of the things that was hard is I didn't know automatically. My brother knew how to clean that up, and I didn't at the time. Yes, that is an actual mess and that is me in the playroom at the time. And Mom had to tell me, okay, pick up the game, pick up the capsules, pick up this, pick up that, and so forth. There were things I did in my early days. I liked swinging. I played soccer as a kid. I did the model train layouts and some of the other things as well from when I was little. These were me back in the day. The other things I had in school, I had a lot of other challenges as well. I had terrible handwriting. They used to say they never would get past third grade if I never mastered cursive. They said that to my mom. Well, I still have not mastered cursive that well. And now I'm a PhD student. How do they explain that one? And we don't even use a real cursive font for our essays either. We use a really plain one known as Times New Roman 12. That's what we use according to APA. I had trouble reading stories. I was very bad with inferences and nuances and symbolisms and sarcasms and idioms and metaphors and those kinds of things, and forming the pictures of stories. I also made no connections between stories and my personal life from fiction. I had a lot of behavior issues. I had some bad days at school. I had allergies, tantrums. Theory of mind. Again, it was hard for me to put my mind in someone else's shoes, and some of these character relationships. And one of the things I later noticed is that there's a lot of relationships between social knowledge of socialization and stories and stuff like that. And things like that. So again, it takes a lot of background knowledge to be able to decipher some of those, and still I'm not great at that. Facts, but on the other hand, I could read facts really, really, really well. Things that were technical or math or science, those were much better at me processing. So again, I was then living in Indiana. We moved a lot as a kid. I moved from Texas to Virginia Beach to Indiana to actually Texas, Indiana, then back to Virginia Beach, then back to Indiana for third and fourth grade in a different house. I was ahead in math. In fact, they had to get a book from the junior high school. I had no friends, but I was mainstreamed into one class, and that was science, and in fourth grade, and it was really finally got some good behavior role models and other things there. And when I was in third grade, it was all segregation. It was, again, I did enter the science there. That's actually me from the science there. I did some other projects as well. So it was really thing. And then in fourth grade, again, that was me, that era. And my math was above there. And some sad things happened in fourth grade. One of my teachers, Miss Craffa, they actually were invited. I wrote some computer code for the Lego Technic control system in that era, and they did not even let me go to the Children's Museum where they ran my program because they claimed it was a behavior issue. So again, this was some of the discrimination that people faced when they were special ed. And all these things, but on the other hand, it was there. And when I lived in Indiana, we did other things for fun. My mom put me in horse therapy or equestrian therapy. I started riding there. I did swimming lessons as well at the JCC, and I was in the playroom all by myself. I hardly got invited to anything special. Didn't get invited to very many birthday parties. So it was kind of lonely, but those were the fun things I had. And then the fourth graders got to do an overnight trip where we went to the Clabber Girl Baking Powder Factory. At the time, it's new owner now, but at the time it was H.J. Holman Company, and the Police Museum, and then Vincent's University. But they did not want to let me go because, again, they claimed a behavior issue. But my mom had to have a lawyer threaten the school district. And then my dad at the time worked in television. He was the TV news director at the time.
Okay.
And he said to them, do you want to let my child go? Or do you want to be on the 5 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, and the 11 o'clock news? And the fact that he was news director scared them. Because again, he could have said, send the camera crew out right then and there. So eventually they let me go, and I did fine. And it was a lot of fun. It was one of the most memorable things of 4th grade. And it was really a good experience. But then we moved again because my dad lost his job. And then so I had to move to my aunt's house in Arizona for 5th grade with Cindy Bright, who's on the right, my friend Melinda Anderson, another teacher from there. I got included for the first time, and I got to do many things. The regular classes were much better than the segregated classes. They had better behavior role models, and these were really a good experience. And I got to do some fun things. I got oceanography field day. I got to the fun runs after school. I got to do a few other things as well. And it was really a great experience at Islands Elementary in Gilbert, Arizona. Hot though, of course, because again, Southern Arizona is one of the hottest places in the nation. And then it's the later picture of me, but there was one thing after that where we were in Mexico for one summer because, again, at my grandma's house, because we were deciding where to go, my dad was applying for some jobs in El Paso, Texas. So I was there in Alamogordo, which is right outside about an hour or something outside El Paso there, and we went up to Ruidoso and stuff like that. They just had to find a later picture because I didn't have any from the earlier era. But we went to shuttle camp and the International Space Hall of Fame, and I got to learn about the different space exhibits and the fun games, and that was a really interesting camp that I went to as well in New Mexico. Just a later picture, but again, throughout the years, they had me do horseback riding lessons through Desert Shadow all the way up to when I was in high school. And I got good at that. In fact, competed in some more shows as a child. It really helped with my balance and my coordination and control and everything. But then we moved to El Paso. And this city was very polluted because of Mexico next to it and people in Juarez that burn trash and other things to stay warm. It's a very poor area next to it. But I lived in an apartment and then a house there. We were in a very tiny apartment for part of 6th grade. And then our stuff was still in storage till we find a house there and so forth. And this is actually me on the front of the El Paso Times paper. That's me right there with starting my hamster Wilbur. And this was like one of the worst school years I've ever experienced. This school district was way far behind of where they used to be, where they should have been, even with accreditation. Most of my teachers had no idea how to support or modify curriculum or do other things to support me inclusion. It was very boring. I followed the janitors around some days because I was just so bored there. It was not a good experience. But little did I know that 20-some years later, they would call me to speak at the very same Texas Region 19 that there. And I really, that time I did a presentation there, I had to think about how I would explain this to them without embarrassing them. Because some of them, who knows, could still work for the district.
How interesting. That must have been kind of, like you said, trying to walk that fine line of telling your story and not making them feel bad.
Yeah, but I wanted them to learn for sure. And then my parents got divorced when I was about 11 years old. And I didn't know what was going to happen. My mom was a single mom at the time. And I didn't know anything about how romance breaks down, especially from the perspective of a child. So it was a very uncertain time. We were going to do 7th grade in El Paso at a school that really believed in me. But then my mom, we ended up moving after the separation to San Diego. But it was a years where there was a lot of conflict between my mom and my dad. I had to take sides on things. It was hard being a pawn. And it was really a lot of uncertainty about what it was like to have one active parent and reduction in income. And it was really, really scary time in my life. And I had so many unanswered questions. And there were a lot of things my mom did not want to tell my dad when I was there. It was very hard to talk to the other side because of that. And would I even be able to see my dad was one of the first questions when he left. And I didn't know where he'd go. I didn't know thing. He ended up moving to other cities, including Colorado and then later Washington, D.C. and Burbank and other places. So it was really interesting. And then I lived with we lived with Bob, who was not the greatest guy. He supported us, but he was a little bit abusive. But my mom asked around when I moved out to San Diego where I should go, and my mom reached out to San Diego State, the inner work department, and they said the best school would be O'Farrell. But that was our neighborhood school, actually. So I went there. It was really good. The teachers were really good to me. I loved Byron King, who was my math teacher. I loved my science teacher. I had a great English teacher in 8th grade, Wells. I had a great social studies teacher, Miss Laughlin. I had industrial arts with Mr. Nierenzinski. I also got to work the tech crew. We made some different things, and although they did get me a little bit of a thing, a little word processor. It wasn't even a true laptop, but that's what the district provided from Radio Shack, actually. For this WP2 and so forth, and it was modified curriculum OT and stuff. And then the things that were challenging at the middle school level is I was teased a lot. I don't think the other kids knew much about disabilities at the time. The speech therapy they gave me sucked. I hate to admit that, but it did. And the way it sucked is it didn't cover any of the social things it was supposed to do. And then it was there were some assignments that involved subject matter I wasn't familiar with. And I continued my horse riding, a Bath equestrian. That was the name of it. Hate to use the word handicap, but that's what they used to use back in the day. And it was my fun thing of the week. And I completed some more shows at Bath and at Sweetwater Farm. And got to eventually learn how to jump the horse and canter and also do dressage and stuff like that. And then we went through that, and then also when I was in middle school, we did some other things. We did some really interesting projects. We actually made a game that on a computer using a HyperCard at the time. And our games were better than those of the grad students at San Diego State, and we were only seventh graders. Can you believe that?
I know. See, you've always done so well with computers.
Yeah, and I decided to go from there. We looked at what high school I should go to, and it was Gompers was the best one for me at the time. And I got to do math and science and computers. That was their focus. I tried to have some modifications in English and history, but I got to do some really good things. And originally we thought Latin would be the best foreign language for me, but it turned out not to be. Actually did better with Japanese, believe it or not. So I was there about a year and a half, and then I really excelled it. I did programming in Pascal and C. I got to do electronics. I got to do tech booth. I got to do a lot of cool stuff there. Although I didn't have any friends at the time. Nobody invited me to their houses. I didn't know anything about the school dances and stuff like that. And it was really good. Technology was really good to me at the time. And that is me getting the Pioneer and Special Ed Award from Gompers at the time on the stage, and got to really do well. I still struggled with English history, though. And that is my dad coming to visit while I was at the school. And did some other things as well. Geometry was my hardest math because it was more proof and number-based and more drawing-based. So that was a little bit more challenging for me. And then my brother, sadly, was a victim of the Gompers Shooting back in 1920s. And actually, not 1992. I'm sorry, not 1992. It was so upsetting that I was in the computer lab, and we were picking up my brother and our friend Amy, who lives in our neighborhood, giving her a ride home that day from the music room. My brother was happened to be in the music room. My mom got my brother and Amy, and they walked out, and she heard pop, 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 and thought, oh, these kids set off a firecracker. And my brother goes, no, Mom, I've been shot. And he later looked down and saw blood. Luckily, what saved me is I was in another room at the time on the other side of the campus. But it was just very tragic. The counselor brought me home and Amy home to my place. And I just watched the news, hoping I didn't know whether my brother would live or die. It was just very, very sad. And I remember putting in some microwave fettuccine and waiting for that call to come. Luckily, he survived. One of the things that was really ironic was that was really happy was one of the best hand surgeons. He injured, bullet injured part of his hand. Luckily, it was fixable. But one of the best hand surgeons in the world, like number 2 in the world, happened to be from France, in San Diego that day. And that surgeon, when he heard this news, he offered to do my brother's surgery.
Wow.
And UCSD, knowing how he's one of the top in the world, let him practice that at their hospital.
Huh.
Originally, I thought they would take my brother to Kaiser Zion Hospital, but because we had Kaiser at the time, but they picked UCSD, and I'm glad they did. And then I transferred to Scripps Ranch High, which was in a much safer neighborhood, and it was one of the newest schools in the district. Beautiful school. It was actually brand new at the time it was built. And I went there, and then finally I got some friends. I still rode horses for part of it and competed in some shows and other things and made a few friends. And PE teacher, Coach King, was amazing. I have a great computer science teacher. I had a really good English teacher who taught me the structure of stories. I ended up taking some really advanced classes. I took stagecraft, I took Japanese, I took AP Physics and AP Computer Science, and math up to calculus, believe it or not, as a special ed student.
Huh.
And I did not take the remedial transition pathway that they offered me, but instead got a real diploma at age 18. Mine actually did count for credit, although I had to have some modifications for English and history, but yes. And I got to do tech theater shows. I worked the lighting board for tech theater. I have still made some friends from that and stuff like that. And finally, in 12th grade, they finally got social skills instruction better. At first, I was just getting communications in the speech room, but I raised some issues. And we decided, the mom and I decided to make this more memorable. And finally realized that there's more to socialization than communication. There were parts that they were not teaching all along, like what is a pep rally? How does one dance for the school dances? What is the different games and other things people go to? How does the class officers meet? What is these kinds of things you hear on the bulletins, but I did not understand. So one of the most memorable experiences, and that's Shannon Biles, someone I still know, don't know as well now, but she would still communicate with her occasionally, is that I realized that the reason I never went to any school dances before is because I did not know how to dance. The deficit was dancing, something they had never assessed on any of the assessments that they do, like the SSRS or the Vineland or any of those behavior scales. None of them addressed the hands-on knowledge of socialization. So they finally realized this and had Claire Rausch and Ann Callie give me some lessons in this. in probably the worst ballroom you could ever imagine. It was a tiny office with some filing cabinets in the back room of the library. But I finally learned how to fast dance, how to slow dance, how to ask someone to dance. But then I was due for homework. And the assignment was go to homecoming. They arranged some people that would dance with me. Shannon was one of them. But I had no date because, again, I was never in a dating relationship. In fact, they never addressed dating or courtship or any of that stuff when I was younger. And I did not pick it up naturally. I didn't know anything about that or how those were formed. Not soliciting anyone in this audience, but I would like people to understand that we just cannot assume everyone is a self-taught expert in this. But that night was one of the most memorable. I finally began to realize what else there was to school other than the English and the math and the science and the history and all the subjects. And these were just some of my friends from high school. Joe and April and Shannon and Lynette and Lorraine. Lauren, some of them were girls, but they were really nice to me. Some of them I still know to this day. In fact, Lynette is one of my best friends from high school drama where I ran the tech crew together. We met pulling up a light to the catwalk, believe it or not. And then they had to find someone for another school who did not have a date for me to go to prom with because I was not in a thing. So I had to do this, and Chelsea and then Clara and her boyfriend drove me because I didn't know how to do this because I would not have my driver's license at the time. I was not in a dating relationship. In fact, I knew little about prom, so they covered my social skills, how to prepare for this. In fact, prom, I knew very little about what prom even was the first time I heard the term. In fact, the only definition I had at the time came from an electronic schematic as an acronym for programmable read-only memory, a type of chip used in embedded systems and computers and arcade games and stuff. But now I learned later that prom was also a term for a formal dance. And I got to go to that. It was a beautiful night. And I had to have some supports when I was in high school as well. I used a laptop and I had some modifications. So homework wouldn't take all my time and some other things as well. And some things like that. So we later decided, where should I go after high school? And traditionally, a lot of times we assume that special ed kids are not going to graduate or age out till they're 21 or 22. Isn't that right, Charmaine?
Yes.
But that is not the pathway I took. I did not want to be a janitor. I did not want to be a fast food worker. I did not want to be a shelf stalker. So I decided to go to school further and applied to San Diego State University. And my parents also did not take away my adult rights, did not conserve me. I'm actually a full adult right now in terms of my rights. I have credit in my own name. I have loans in my own name. I have withdrawal rights to my bank account. I drive a car. In fact, I drive a manual transmission car, which is owned in my name. I've traveled all over, and I can consent to things. I've signed documents, legal papers. I've done all sorts of things that are independent, make me independent. So I went on to San Diego State University, and I chose that because it was a good school for technology. It was a great school for thing, and it was a beautiful thing. And we interviewed their disability services because the C was next. Originally, they thought, oh, go to community college like Miramar College or Mesa College or City College or one of those. But we interviewed at Miramar, and we were not very impressed with what they offered. Then they said, oh, sign up for some segregated program at Grossmont College. But when I looked at the curriculum of that, I knew more from Scripps Ranch High than it offered. So that was out. So some friends of ours said, go to San Diego State. So I applied there, and I got in like a normal student with an acceptance letter back. And I went part-time, so it took me about 10 years to finish, but I finished it. And part of the time I was there living on campus, part of the time I was not, and so forth. And I took some few classes and had to have extra time for tests and other things as well, and so forth. And I worked part-time for Interwork and See, it's collaborative, some of the projects that were setting the State Foundation at the time. And I later decided to move into the dorms to see what that was like, and ended up learning to do my own laundry and my own cleaning and my own things like that. And I worked there as well, and was a computer tech and a gradebook programmer, and did other things as well. And then I managed to graduate with my bachelor's degree in 2007. And we went to the bottom of the arena, and I got my degree. And that is me and my brother hugging me with my mom next to it, and me graduating. And then I worked for Health Science High for a year after that, and then I got laid off. But that was the same year that the economy was going into a tailspin. And it really put me into depression. And because when I worked there, and then they said they were keeping me, and then they said laid off because this whole financial crisis happened. That was the same year that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and Lehman and Countrywide and all those companies were collapsing. And my mom was in the real estate business, so it took a lot of toll on our family. So after that, I decided to go for my master's degree. That's Susan Marks there from Northern Arizona. She suggested that maybe I come there. So I just applied and got in. It was a beautiful university up in the mountains of Flagstaff, Arizona. It's beautiful. Got accepted. And then I got decided to change fields and got my master's in disability policy. From there, it took a couple of years. I had great professors and supports were good. It was a beautiful place there. And then that was me and my dad, who ended up coming from my NAU graduation and so forth. And I got the degree there as well. And then I've been traveling all over the country since my thing and presenting on things as well at conferences all over the place. It's just some of the places I got to go to. Colorado, I got to present for Parent Center many times. That's where I actually met Charmaine, and that's actually Mary Jo Weston in the picture, who heard I'd never been skiing, so she offered to take me one year, my friend Mary Jo. Went to Colorado Springs for UCCS to present to a class there. I got to present on the Big Island of Hawaii at Council for Exceptional Children, and then at Lapahoihoi Charter School. And my friend Amanda from high school lived there at the time. She eventually moved back to the Honolulu area, but she was on the Big Island for a while. And I went to Kona Hilo. Got to do the Superior Court of Mojave in La Paz County. They were trying to deal with a lot of kids with autism and child protective services. But the court was from Arizona, but the closest city with a conference center, because it was a small town, was Laughlin. So I went there. I did training for Rio Rancho schools in New Mexico. It's a beautiful place. I actually got to go to the Balloon Fiesta.
Cool.
In Maggie Cordova Elementary. I got to present for this lady here in Long Beach, Cal State Long Beach, for the classes there. Got to present at TASH, and these were some of the people who talked to me, Sarah and Stephanie and Ellen at TASH in Chicago. I'm going to present for Emily Nussbaum when she used to work at Cal State Fresno. Got to present there. Going to present with the state director special ed, who's now, I think, state superintendent. I'm not sure now, but Colleen Riley from Kansas and Wichita. We presented together, and everybody thought we'd rehearsed it, although we just met that day. So worked so well, although we talked on the phone a little bit. Got to present in Missouri for Rachel Morgan at University of Missouri St. Louis and Lindenwood as well. Went to Fort Zumwalt School District and did some professional development for the teachers there. St. Peter's, Missouri. Going to present for Glenda over in Hot Springs, Arkansas at Henderson State University, where I got to do some other things as well. And I did one talk to the children's team on a military base at Edwards Air Force Base. Going to present to thing, and yeah, that's a bomber plane in the background there. Going to present, got to see their flight line as a result. I've been in Pittsburgh several times, the Peel Center, and at Duquesne University to present there. I'm going to be part of the 21st Century Community Learning Center's Technical Working Group, where we went into the U.S. Department of Education outside Washington, D.C. This was one of the most memorable. I got to present in Australia as well. I met Leanne Perman at Western Australia Individualized Services at a conference in La Jolla. It was supposed to be in Toronto on the other side in another country, but Beth Gallagher moved it to San Diego because Toronto was booked up because of the Pan Am Games. So all the venues were booked up. So, and I met Leanne, and she heard me. I was asked to present at that conference in the last minute. And then she heard me and said, we got to get you to Australia. And I thought, this was a pipe dream. But Leanne was serious. And pretty soon we were talking over Skype. And Later, I had a plane ticket on Qantas in my box to go all the way to Perth on the other side of the world. It was a beautiful trip. I was in Australia for about 12 days. I got to see Sydney on the way back. Got to go to the Blue Mountains. It was really an amazing trip. I got to do some things for WashU schools in Reno, Nevada as well. And presented there at Truckee Meadows Community College. I got to present to a class at Stanford University. I got to present, that's Marisha Rucker. I presented with her at TASH. She is one on how to make high school proms more inclusive. She is one of the ladies that fought the race segregation in Wilcox several years ago. We presented together at TASH in Atlanta. I got to present about the EVV concerns of disability to SAN Data Technologies out in Port Washington, actually Hempstead, New York, I believe it is, or Port Washington, right outside of Roslyn and Long Island. And these are just some of the K-12 schools I presented to. Schools in California, Colorado, Texas, Missouri, Florida, Colorado, Oklahoma, Nevada, Wisconsin. And I've also presented for more than 30-some universities as well in California, Arkansas, Massachusetts, Missouri, New York, New Hampshire, Maryland, Florida, Carolinas. I presented all over the place. And it was really amazing getting to go all these places and speak about disabilities to so many audiences. And I also presented to so many organizations around the country, from the Autism Society to the Autism Projects to ARC to Captain to Boys and Girls Club to Desert Mountain SELPA to Enable to Florida Inclusion Network to the Howard County Autism Society in Maryland to Qantas to Lady Lolly, which was part of the Red Cross of Australia, to Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Ed, to Kids Included Together out of San Diego, to mental health, to the Parent Center Network, to PEAK, to PEAL, to Fiduciary, to Supported Life Institute, to TASH, to 10 Step, to the advocate programs. There was just a whole lot of places I've been when I think about this. And then I presented to many different governments, organizations as well, from Arizona, California, Illinois, North Dakota, Nevada, Wyoming, the Air Force. And then I decided to move again in 2018 when I was called to Chapman University. Originally, I thought this was just present to their Disability Summit conference. It turned out to be much, much, much more. And when I was called up, originally they booked an inn and they booked some train travel, and they asked me to speak in their Musco Center for the Arts, which is a beautiful auditorium. And then I started getting calls from the Thompson Policy Institute to say, I was not even soliciting Chapman at all. But I said to them, at some point, I may go for my PhD somewhere. They evidently picked up on this. And I applied like a normal person, and originally I thought, how am I going to pay for this? This is a very expensive, very selective, private institution. This is not a public college, a private college. So I thought the tuition's going to be outrageous, and it was. But I applied because I was encouraged, and I talked to other people about this who know some of the people at Chapman. And they all said I would not be recommended for this program if I was not a good candidate. So I applied. And then we went through a lot of weird stuff trying to get accommodations for the GRE test, which they wanted me to do a full re-diagnosis. This was not Chapman. This was the GRE people out of New Jersey who handle the administration of the test. So I took the course for it and stuff, and I tried to get extra time and use of a laptop and everything, but they wanted me to do a full re-diagnosis of autism. Very, very expensive to be eligible. And I sent them things. I use these test accommodations at NAU, at STSU, at all these things. Letter from my counselor, letter from the regional center, letter from a bunch of other things, and they still wanted a doctor's re-diagnosis. So I was telling Chapman I was going through this, and I'm not asking for anything. So they said they'd check with their disabilities office to see if they could do it there. Originally, I was going to take the test down in San Diego, where I was from, where I was living at the time, down at SDSU. But I said to them, if they could accommodate, I'd be willing to drive up to Orange to do it. They ended up waiving that, but I ended up, because they were not happy what I've been going through. So I applied, and I paid my $500, and then I filed for financial aid through FAFSA. And then I get an email from who's the dean at the time. I've got a new one now, but at the time, Margaret Grogan. And it said, I've been awarded a President's Fellowship Award to cover tuition. I said, how much is this worth? This is probably going to be about 100 grand of classes. They said all of it to graduation.
Wow.
I was in disbelief when I got that scholarship. I was going like this, and I thought just getting into public school was hard, having a disability. But this was a private who really wanted me, and I could tell that for the recruiting. And now I'm a third-year PhD student. The challenge I've had is the emotional challenge from this coronavirus outbreak when everything's shut down and they're not reopening in the fall. They're just going to be through the web for a bit, but hopefully they do want to reopen soon because it's costing them not only a lot of money, but a lot of the experience is gone, sadly. But that's not Chapman's fault. It's some person who sold some exotic animal in China that spread it around the world. But eventually I do hope they reopen their campus. But still, it was a beautiful campus, and I got to go to that. And now I'm a second year, and I've been studying under some of the best professors I've ever done, including Megan Kosher and Scott Danforth and Ryan Allen and Keith Howard and Lilia Monzo and some of the others. And believe me, it was not an easy program to get into. Out of 60-some people that applied, they only took about 12. That's how selective they were.
I know. And I remember, when you were like first getting those emails from Chapman and wondering if they were really offering you this full scholarship. And it turned out, yes.
They under the rules, they told me that they knew that it was a scholarship from the get-go, but they could not reveal it until I had gone through all the application process and all of that stuff. But they were told me they were going like that, wanting me there. And then I said to Daniele Strupa, who's the president of Chapman, thank you is an understatement. It really is a dream come true.
Oh, I know. We have a couple questions, Stephen.
And then I'm just gonna finish my last slide for 1 minute here. I'm gonna work on a book with Grace Thanaroni, although it's been on hiatus a little bit because I've been working so much at school and stuff. But one of my goals is to someday find the right person to get my life, to live my life with, and be able to travel around and consult and stuff and get my PhD and maybe even go for a high-level career in this field, maybe a policy admin or something high up, maybe in the state, or maybe become a professor, who knows. But it really, and I was one of those people who they thought had no future. And the lessons for all of you are to make sure that we never put limits on anyone when they're young, and to give people on the disabilities a chance to enjoy a quality life and to be able to have opportunities to get through school as high a level as the person wants to go and succeed, and to have a life comparable to those without disabilities. So I will take some questions. Let me go back to the
Okay, so this one is about helping students be better self-advocates. So what advice do you have? Can you see the question now, Stephen?
Yeah, I turned it over so I can see the chat box and stuff now.
Okay.
But yes, I'll answer that. Tammy asked a great question. How can they be better self-advocate? Again, what they have to do is to make sure that they challenge the limits of the system, that they understand how to make change. They understand not to just take no for an answer, and to undermine the barriers, and to really speak out for what makes things well for you, what does well for you, how to better policies. As they say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. We need to make sure kids with disabilities are the squeaky wheel, and we need to make sure adults listen to them instead of assuming that they don't want to be heard. Children, I think, need to be heard and not just be seen, and to make sure that that they have a voice and to make sure that they get input as to what programs they're doing, what direction their lives are taking, where the options take them, what road paths they want to take, get involved in their academic life, their social life, their personal life, and make sure that they have an opportunity to succeed and make some things, even if it's not the easiest track of all.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's great advice. She also was wondering, when you look back for your earlier school years, what would you have done differently?
A lot of things, actually. One of the things I wish they would have done is I wish they would have done more to the extracurricular parts of school earlier and help me with friends and stuff and used a better curriculum than just words in a speech room. I wished the other things that would have happened is they would have earlier worked with me on how to break down stories, where I struggled with that for so many years. And I wished I would have been involved more in the planning of my schooling younger. It wasn't until later years when they invited me into IEPs and other things, because a lot of it was my mom and dad making all the decisions, but and it was third party perspective, not first hand, which was meant that sometimes I had to even go against my parents sometimes in making decision, which was a power struggle usually, but I knew a lot of the times I did, I was right.
Yes, and you can probably see in the chat, Stephen, you're getting lots of thank yous. And congratulations for all that you have accomplished. I wanted to show people how they can get in touch with you. So let me bring this up. Is there any other places that they can, like on social media, that they can find you?
I'm on Facebook, and I'm also on you can call me 858-603-0287.
Well, there you go. That's a pretty direct way to call or to get a hold of you, right?
Yep, and then I'm going to be and also, if anybody wants me to speak, I am available, of course. Sometimes they have to work around my school schedule, but I am willing to do it. And even though everybody's in fear of this, if somebody asked me to speak live, I would still do it. Whether if somebody asked me a non-virtual this year, I'm not as fearful of wait till there's a vaccine before interacting with non-family as some people are, and I respect people's opinions on that. In fact, this virus had led to the most loneliness in life that I've ever experienced, and people can't even meet with each other. It's just, I just think it's, what are we living for if person to person meetings don't come back, and I really hope that the interaction comes back, and we find some way to tackle this coronavirus with either by testing or doing something else. And I believe in science. I'm not one of these Trump people, but I also believe that they should do more when one's single, to have some interaction during this time and better job of preparing people for what came with how abruptly they shut down our country.
Oh, I know. And would you have any advice for students as far as distance learning?
Well, there's several things here for distance learning. In the K-12 system, sorry, somebody's mowing the grass back there. In the K-12 system, one of the first things I think is that, I think young kids probably benefit from having someone stay at home with them. As much as people need to work, I think distance learning works better for people more in the upper grades. The next thing I think is to make sure we're getting all the accommodations and modifications and accessible websites and other things like that in place when it starts, so our special ed kids don't get by. And that even includes things like speech and OT. And I also think that even though if some people want to avoid big gatherings, I think kids should be getting a little bit of interaction with their friends during this time, even if it's just one at a time. And the other thing is to make sure that schools should, Susan, the other thing is that schools need to make sure should consider opening their campuses by appointment for subjects that we cannot do over distance learning. Like, for example, what happens if a child's class, part of the curriculum is industrial arts or performing arts or PE or career tech ed or science laboratory or things that need real equipment or group work or other things like that to succeed correctly. And I think it's important that we still make sure that we find ways of getting those experiences so they don't get behind, and we get some tutoring and some office hours if kids are behind or don't. The other thing I recommend is offering the option of asynchronous, because let's say a child does not have a stay-at-home parent, and let's say that let's say they're with a single parent, and that worker is essential and has to work during the daytime outside the home. Let's say they work in the hospital, or maybe they're the one who cooks the takeout food, or maybe they work in the grocery store, or maybe they work the guy who fixes the power lines when the things go out, or maybe they work in the server rooms for Netflix or whatever. Again, Charmaine, are you still there?
Yes, I was just putting you solo.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I just wondered if you were still there. But reality is, not everybody is going to have a stay-at-home parent, and some are going to be essential workers. So if the kids can log on in the evening hours or at night without a penalty in some cases, or do their work on different days if they can't sit in front of the computer 5 days a week from 7 a.m. to 2:10, don't get marked absent, but instead do it more like a college does for a module each week, do their lectures on video with the option of live chat if they want to. for some, the last thing we also have to do is to make sure that if they get modified curriculum, that we provide the right assignments that are modified through the system, and to make sure for those in rural areas are another big challenge, and that is what happens if the internet connections, like out in the boonies or out in the back country or other things. You have to understand sometimes they connect by satellite or by dial-up even, or by things that do not have a lot of bandwidth. So that means sometimes streaming video is not an option for them. With some of them are charged with how much data and experience slowing if you go over your limit in some of those satellite connections. So what you want to do is maybe if they're doing like a video lecture, provide it by mailing them a DVD or on a Blu-ray or something. Probably a DVD would be better because more compatibility, but to do it that way and then set up an office hour if needed, and to understand that it might be more limited, and we need to make sure that no kids failing during this time. Because again, you have to understand that distance learning requires a lot of computer skills, a lot of self-motivation, a lot of vocabulary, and to be able to do things without a teacher present, which is very different than the in-class experience where you've got a teacher, you've got help right there, you've got all the things. And I think it's very important that kids get a break in the day, and to make sure we give kids sufficient exercise and fun during this time. And so it's not all sit in front of the screen time.
Right. And you have such great ideas, Stephen. I love it. I never thought about, like recording a lecture or a lesson on a DVD and, being able to send that to the students so they could access it. I love that. So we are past the top of the hour, which is okay, because I love your conversation, having this conversation and getting your tips and advice. If people aren't currently receiving my weekly emails, and if you'd like to, you could connect with me, because I'll be taking some of the key takeaways from Stephen's presentation today and emailing that out to folks, and some other surprises too that you'll get. Holly is here from Arizona, and it sounds like I'm echoing when I talk, but she talks about appreciating your deep understanding of what parents and students are going through, and recognizing the problem with attendance. And I think you saw that Susan Mark said hey to you. So Susan is here with you live.
One of my professors from NAU.
I know.
Hi, Susan.
So thank you so much, Stephen, for taking time. And we appreciate the role model, I guess, for other students to show what is possible when we have high expectations. And we don't, track students with disabilities into something that won't, lead to an outcome of college education, if that's what they're looking for. And pretty soon we'll be able to call you Dr. Stephen Hinkle.
And I'd like to comment, if somebody does take a non-college track, you mentioned that, Charmaine, just a second ago. The thing that I want everybody to know is that transition is going through a transition right now. And it's not only we have unprecedented times from COVID-19, we also need to start preparing people with disabilities for jobs that will be around. Our retail sector is going through a massive downsizing right now with record numbers of store closures and bankruptcies. Many people are choosing healthier food over fast food. We are experiencing it, and as the downsizing go on Dan Bell or Aces Adventures or Retail Archaeology or on YouTube, you'll see video after video of store closures and dead malls. The key is here, we have historically prepared people for a career paths that were very low, were menial. And now what we're going to have to do is to prepare people for a much greater range of career paths that use our talents, that we redefine it to prepare for jobs with a living wage salary, and be able to go through self-determination based individual budget service delivery models, and be able to and accommodate the shift away from a norm of group homes and stuff, instead for community life. And more people with disabilities are dating and getting married. Less and less are choosing guardianship and instead allowing people to have their adult rights or supported decision making. So I want to point out that what we have to do is redefine it to today's society, and the old model, I think, is headed to the wrecking ball. And people need to understand that persons with disabilities can achieve a quality adult life, and we just have to start preparing for a new generation.
Yes, very wise word. Because, yeah, I know you and I have talked about this before as far as the changes in the, the economic system and what that means for jobs for, people. And so, yeah, I think you have that insight and that wisdom, which is really important. So I so appreciate you being here. Oops, we just lost Stephen. And Stephen has been, as I said earlier, on my show a couple other times. So I will also give you the link for 2 other shows that Stephen was with us on. Hey, Stephen.
Sorry, I hit a wrong button.
That's fine. I was saying, I remember you've been on my show 2 other times. And so I'll also give people the links to those shows that we did together.
Yeah.
And I hope that you with Chapman, will be able to go to live classes soon, and that in California, things will flatten out and you can get back to the social things that you enjoy too.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for being with us, and we will see everybody next week live on Thursday at noon Mountain Time.
Yeah.
So have a great, thanks, Stephen.